turn it on when you're ready, Justin. We'll start.
Oh, you're on. You're ready
Okay,
to go.
all right. Well, everybody, welcome to the real last class. Kristen and I were talking about this yesterday about whether it was appropriate to have a quiz on the last day of class, and it occurred to me afterwards that really isn't the last day of class. This is our makeup class, right? So here you are, and what we're going to do is proceed the following way. We're going to talk about exam writing, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to drag out an old environmental law exam question, and in fact it's one that's in your package, and I will show you, I want to give you a feel for how I would score it, because I think that would be useful to folks, and then finally we'll take questions. Because we're recording this, and because folks indicated some interest in the exam writing part of that, I know Jess, you said that yesterday, and I get that. I'm going to, even though some of you I think have already seen this and already heard this, I'm going to make sure that everybody gets it. And if you have along the way a question, especially when I'm talking about the exam, by all means let me know. One quick thing I need to tell you is that some years ago when I was working on the second edition of my exam writing book, the student who was helping me with that at the time said that after he started reading the exam writing book, he began getting A's in all his essay classes. Pretty bright guy, pretty capable guy. But one of the reasons that I get interested in exam writing, partly it's about fairness. I don't think it's right to have your grade on which your career depends hinge on whether you sort of lucked out figuring what I really wanted because I never really told you. Somehow that seems unfair to me. But the larger thing that I'm trying to do with this exercise is give you a sense of doing this that might be helpful in a lot of your classes. I've gotten a lot of feedback on this. I'm a career environmental person. I've got passion about the environment, sustainability, and climate change. A lot of you know all that. But I spend time on this. I spend time on this because student after student after student over the last 10 or more years has come up to me and said, look, this changed my life. I'm here in law school because of this. I got A's in law school because of this. And it doesn't take too many of those kinds of stories about that book before you begin to believe, all right, that this is more than just a little value. And I'm a self-effacing Midwesterner. I'm not particularly self-promoting. I don't do that very well. I have to be kind of pushed into it. But I'm telling you this because that's reality. All right. So as a starting point, professors often complain about all the time they spend grading exams. That's really not quite right. We spend an enormous amount of time scoring exams. And by that I mean we take your words and sentences and we turn them into numbers. That's basically how this works. And so the vocabulary distinction that I want to introduce to you here is between scoring and grading. And what you're going to see is the scoring is by far the most important thing. And by the time we finally get to figuring out what grade to give your score, there's really not a whole lot left to decide. We meaning professors, spend most of our time scoring. And so I will spend an entire day scoring problem 1. And on a really good day, I do maybe 20 with problem 1. And I want you to sort of be thinking about that a little bit when I talk to you about the clarity of your answer, about making sure that I get it, making sure that your other professors actually understand what you're saying. Because the hard, cold reality is on that day, you may be number 17. I may get to your exam at 2:30 in the afternoon. At that point, Mountain Dew is a good beverage for grading, scoring exams, okay? But I've already read 16 of these. I've got a few more to go. I like you. I like all of you. This has been a great class, okay? But as far as I'm concerned, Dan Dreer is number 75346, okay? And I have no idea who he is, okay? And as they say in the mafia movies, okay, when I'm scoring, nothing personal, it's just business. So here's a distribution of raw scores in a sample class. You probably can't read the numbers. Probably not even Rich and Tiffany can read the numbers, okay? But down here it shows 38, okay? Over here it shows 154. Think about that. The difference between the bottom score and the top score is a multiple of about 4. on this exam. That's a little high. This is an older exam. My more recent exams, the multiple is usually about 2, 2.5 between the bottom scores and the top scores. And there's a couple of things, there's a couple of conclusions that you might want to draw from that. All right? As a starting point, understand what I said just a couple minutes ago. The scoring process is what really determines your grade. Okay? It's like if you get if you score up in here, I may have to do some thinking about, or in this area, whether you get an A or an A minus, or maybe further down whether you get a B plus. But there's not a lot of doubt that you're going to get a very good grade. Down here, all right, if you're scoring down here, you're going to be lucky to get above a C minus. And another thing that is useful to say here, all right, is that acts of generosity to one student are unfairness to other students. Let me give you an example, all right? Let's say I decide down here to give, or excuse me, I decide, okay, I decide up here, we'll give this in a positive way, okay? I decide up here to award A's way down deep into the pack. All right, well, how fair is that to these two that got significantly higher scores than all the rest? Generosity down here, but maybe these people don't get the entire full credit in terms of the quality of their performance and respect for their performance that they deserve. All right, and I can do the same kind of thing applies all the way up and down this. The third thing that is worth saying about this is that I no longer employ just raw scores to figure out your grade. The way your grade is going to work in this class is as follows. 25% of your grade is in the 3 quizzes. We're just going to add up the raw scores for the 3 quizzes, and they go into a statistical matrix of some kind that I don't fully understand, but Dion Anton does this and it works. And David Raker Jordan does it and it works. And the second thing then is you're going to have on this exam 2 75-minute questions. That's it. It's a 2.5-hour exam. It's not a 3-hour exam. It's a 2.5-hour exam. And it's a 2.5-hour exam in deference to the 3 quizzes. Okay, I ought to give you some benefit for having done the 3 quizzes, you know. So it's a 2.5-hour exam, and there are 2 75-minute questions, probably 2 75-minute questions. I'm thinking maybe they're not quite of equal value. That's something I've got to figure out between, well, now and the next couple of days. But they're going to be 2 big questions, and they'll either be worth each of them half your remaining grade, 37.5%, or something close to that. If I decide to go 90-60, it'll be a little different. It'll either be 75-75 or 90-60, probably, something like that. But in any event, I put all that in a statistical matrix. And what happens is assume that we have 2 75-minute questions, all right? What that means is that when you get to the end of 75 minutes, wrap it up. Wrap it up. There's a tendency for folks, and I've seen this over the years, invariably on exams, okay, I get lower scores on question 2. That's just how it works, okay? But think about this. If you decide, well, I'm just going to go 90 minutes in on a 75-minute question because I want to squeeze those last few points out, what that means is 37.5% of your grade depends on what you write in an hour. Okay? When, presumably, some significant number of your classmates will be writing 75 minutes on exactly the same problem. You get where I'm going? And because I'm using the statistical thing, it's not just a raw score. You can't compensate by hitting a 3-deck home run on problem 1 for the fact that problem 2 you didn't get very many points. Each of them is going to be run out and curved as if they were a separate part of the exam, and then the 3 separate parts are going to be pulled together. Am I being clear enough about this? Okay? And one thing you want to pay attention to in your other classes is if your other professors are doing the same thing, it doesn't help you to go over. So budgeting your time becomes a very important aspect here. It becomes a very important thing to do. All right. So you all ought to know the answers to these questions, but I want to get you into the feel of this because you haven't started writing exams yet, okay? These are like warm-up questions, okay? We'll do harder stuff maybe later. But for now, take a look at this. What's the right answer? Huh?
B.
Yeah, B as in boy, absolutely. Okay? How about this one? Chris?
A.
Yeah, I think. Okay? How about this one? Yeah, I hope you're all picking D. Okay? So, let me explain how it works. And one thing I want to share with you is I get this every year, people say, well, okay, but that book is for your exam. This, my other exams, I don't need that, okay? I'll just learn what the professor says. Understand this, all right? I got here as a mid-career person. All my law school notebooks, all my law school texts, all my law school memories were long ago, okay? Recycled or lost or whatever, okay? So I get here after more than 10 years out of law school, and I have to figure out what this exam writing thing is all over again. And what I did is I went up and down the halls and talked to people. And what I found was that what I'm describing to you characterized pretty much what everyone was doing on essay exams. And you hear sometimes statements from students saying, well, the professors all do it differently. Well, they do it about this much differently. Okay, the field of commonality is enormous. That's one of the reasons an awful lot of you get pretty much the same grade from class to class to class to class. Because we're all doing pretty much the same thing. I know there's inconsistencies. Not everybody does well in all classes, and there's a lot of explanations for that. But there's a considerable amount of commonality, okay, across grades. And we don't talk to each other. We don't say, well, how's member 73412 doing on this year's exams? Okay, we don't do that. None of us care that much. And it'd be unfair and wrong and all that besides. But it's just how it works. So here's the scoring continuum. And this is basically, and so I'm describing to you, okay, is not so much, this is how you do it for me, all right? I'm a travel guide. I'm explaining a landscape that I had to learn in order to do my job here. So here's what happens. If you, the lowest scores, and again, this is probably too small for even Tiffany and Rich to read, okay, but the lowest scores are the folks with the fewest rules, the fewest elements, the least analysis, the fewest conclusions, no counter-arguments, no policies. That's where the lowest scores are. The highest scores, the people that discuss the most issues, have the most rules, discuss the most elements, have the most complete analysis, discuss the most counter-arguments, the most policies, and draw the most conclusions. And it's a range, right? This is a high, this is a low, most folks are in the middle somewhere. But that's basically how this works. Now, the other thing to understand is that not all things that you write on the exam are created equal. Not all have the same value. Not all are going to help you as much. By and large, the way it works is that the most points are for your analysis. The most points are for your analysis. The fewer points are for your rules and conclusions. Now, it is true, certainly in my exams, and I think in other exams as well, that if you don't state the rule, if you don't state the element up front, it's really hard to give you credit for that. On a property exam some years ago, I had a student who basically retold the story of the problem and then drew a conclusion. And if you understand anything at all about all the different ways you could game a system, all right, that's not a bad way to do it if all you understand is he gives points for the facts. But I don't just give points for the facts. If you don't organize them into a legal structure, you get no points at all. So these, stating the rules, stating the elements, those two in particular are your keys to scoring well, all right, on an exam, to getting any points at all for your facts. Now, some of you know that I rather enjoy Star Trek. I still remember Star Trek from high school. And one of the things that Mr. Spock does on Star Trek, you all know Vulcan mind melds? Maybe the better question is, does anybody besides Robert know the Vulcan mind meld? Okay, so what happens with the Vulcan mind meld, okay, for those of you who don't speak the language, all right, and the new generation will give you a chance to learn this, the new cool hip Spock as opposed to the old guy Spock, okay, but he basically puts his hands on your head and he can read your thoughts, all right? I don't do Vulcan mind melds, okay? If you're sitting there on the exam and you thought of something and you had it all down, and I can't tell you how often I've heard this in my office, oh, it's all there in my head. I can't get it out of your head. Okay? I can't get it out of your head. So it's your job, it's what you write is what you get points on, not what you were thinking, not what you knew, not what you could have written. So, there's a standard form to writing an answer. And it's incredible when you see it. It's powerful when you see it. Basically, how it works is it's a variant of IRAC. All right? It's a variant of IRAC. And here's basically how it works. You state the rule. It doesn't matter what rule this is. This could be adverse possession. This could be, does this require a permit under the Clean Water Act? Okay? It could be, it doesn't matter what the rule is. And then you state the first element, okay? You apply the element to the facts, and you draw a conclusion. Then you state the second element, you apply it to the facts, you draw a conclusion. If it's a two-element rule, draw a conclusion on the rule. That's it, all right? And then you get to rule 2, and you do the same thing all over again for each element. Every single element. And one thing I should add, and I'll probably say this again, is that it helps a lot if you take this element application conclusion thing for each element and put it in a separate paragraph. That's a good thing for you, and it's a good thing for me. It's a good thing for you because you know how completely or incompletely you've analyzed something before you go on to the next paragraph. It's a good thing for me because I know then it's easy for me to award points. Again, think about this. You know, you're the exam I grade in the middle of a lazy afternoon. All right? I score, I'm sorry, in the middle of a lazy afternoon. The easier it is for me to give you points, the better off you're going to be. The harder it is for me to give you points, the worse off it's going to be for you. So, another way to think about this, and what I'm leading up to really, and I'll explain this in a second, but what I'm leading up to is, imagine, if you will, go back in time. Do you remember when you first learned how to drive? You sort of look at the floor, where's the accelerator? Where's the brake? Okay, where's the turn signal on the car? And as you get into a different car, you sometimes have to learn some of these things. All right? Oh, how do I do the gear shift thing, right? I'm shifting, I've got a manual transmission. How do I go from first to second? How do I get into reverse? After you've been driving for a while, all of those things, the knowledge of those things becomes so natural that you don't have to think about them because you can simply concentrate on your driving. The things that I am describing to you now should be so natural that you can simply do them without having to spend a lot of time thinking about them. And if they're not yet natural, spend some part of your time before final exams begin practicing exam writing so that these things become more natural by the time you start writing about them. And so what happens, here's what the place where you want to be then is in the following. You state or identify the rule, okay, the big rule, right? And maybe you state it in the form of a question. Does this project, okay, does this activity need a permit under the Clean Water Act? Okay, you've identified the rule. There's something about permitting in the Clean Water Act. What's the next step, okay? And you ought to be, and as soon as you get done doing this, you shouldn't be sort of saying, okay, now what do I do next? And thinking about that for a long time. You should know instinctively, automatically, just like you're driving, what the next step is. Oh, I have to state the first element. Okay, let's see. Do we have a pollutant here? Okay? All right, I write that down. What's the next step? Okay, well, again, you shouldn't be thinking hard about this. Each of these prompts should be coming up automatically. Okay, you apply it, you trot out the facts, describe them, then draw a conclusion. And at the end of each one of these things, you're thinking automatically, and you're going automatically to the next step. The place where you don't want to be, all right, is you're 98 minutes into the exam, and you're thinking, okay, I just did this. What do I do now? Where am I? Don't want to be in that place. So, a couple of things that are good for you and good for me that are beyond those points. Discuss every issue separately. I think you should have probably heard that in legal writing, maybe. Okay. Discuss each issue separately or each element separately. Describe the law before you apply to the facts. This is huge. If I don't know what rule you're applying, if I don't know what law you're talking about, it's impossible for me to give you credit. I will not give credit for bare facts. All right? And then signpost your discussion. And what I mean by that are a couple of things. If there's a Clean Water Act and a Clean Air Act issue in the problem, somehow make it clear to me, you know, clean air, clean water, something, a little heading, just something, however minimal, that gives me some idea of where you are and what you're writing about. Make it as easy for me to follow your analysis as possible. And I'm not asking for neon signs or anything elaborate or two-color ink. Oh, please don't do that. All right, all I'm asking for is something simple and basic. All right, it doesn't take you very much time to let me know where you are and what you're writing about. Having a separate paragraph for each element helps like crazy. Writing well helps like crazy. If what you're doing is you're handwriting, and you have serious concerns about the legibility of your handwriting, then give some thought to doing your exam on ExamSoft on a laptop. If you have to handwrite, or if you want to handwrite, and that's okay, I'm all right with that. I don't like, I'm good. Make sure at least that I understand what you're saying. If I don't understand what you're saying, I cannot and will not give you credit for it. Okay? All right. So, this is not the Andrea Wood problem. That's another problem, but this is, and that's it. Wrong. That's the one slide I didn't fix from Sunday. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the following. All right. Take a look at exercise 4. Take a look at exercise 4. It's an old Superfund problem. You may remember Superfund, though so long ago. All right. So the question, and this is an old exam question. All right. And the questions at the bottom are actually a little more limited than the questions that were asked. But question number 1 captures pretty much what was on the exam. All right. And what I want to show you is part of an answer to exercise 4. All right. One other thing I should say though is before you start writing, make a list of the issues. Okay, make a list of the issues that are on the question. There's one we're going to talk about in a bit, the one with the zebra mussel problem. Okay, the zebra mussel problem has basically involves three statutes. It involves the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, and NEPA. All right, those 3 issues are all tied into that. And if you do nothing else, identify the statutes that are involved and the particular kind of statutory issue that's involved. Read the problem through, make a little list of what the issues are. You make your little list, all right, and then after you've read the problem, you make your little list, and that becomes your sort of navigating device, if you will, through the problem. Because what happens is, there's a couple things. You look at that and you say, okay, how much time I've got as a 75-minute problem, all right, I'm 10 minutes in right now. How much time is it going to take me to write about each of these three things? Are they all about equal? Does some have way more elements and way more facts than others? Is one of these something I can write about in 5 minutes? And begin to get a sense, begin to ask yourself about how much time is this going to take? And so if you decide, for example, I can tell you what the exercise is exercise 15B, as in boy, okay, the zebra mussel problem. You say, okay, so here's what we've got. All right, there's a Clean Water Act problem here. There's an Endangered Species Act issue here, and there's a NEPA issue here. Okay? And what you might say is permit, prohibited, okay? And you might, I don't know, I'll just say this, you would need an EIS, okay? And that might be it, all right? But what happens is, because exercise 15, I should say, in its original form was an incredibly open-ended question, and it basically said, okay, are there any legal issues here? All right, and I emphasized in the original version of exercise 15B how significant it is, or how expansive that might be by saying, you're representing an environmental group that opposes this. All right? So what happens is, you get something like that, and you make, and this is the list, okay? This might be the list that you begin with. You don't have to write out all the elements, you don't have to highlight the facts in 4 colors. All right, you can do all that if you want, but if time management is an issue for you, and you want to get through this as fast as you can, you've got this. All right, and then you say, okay, I have 65 minutes left. It has taken me 10 minutes. It has taken me 10 minutes to read the problem, understand the question, figure out what the issues are. I'm pretty sure that's a complete list. How long is each of these going to take me? And you might look at that and you might say, well, I don't know. Maybe they're all equal. Okay? So let's assume for the moment they're all equal. 65 minutes to go, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. This is all ballpark, right? It might be that you're done with this in 16 minutes. It might be that you're done with this in 22 minutes. All right, but if you've got the idea that they're all about equal in time, then what happens is once, if you're 25 minutes into this and you're only half done, that ought to be telling you something. Right? Yeah, Bo.
When you tell a person to spend just that amount of time on these 3 things, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, and 20 minutes, well, let's say you screw up on the one. Do you just kind of cut it off, stop writing, and hope you fill in the blanks and move on to the next one, or?
Well, you're saying you wrote about the wrong thing and you know it?
Not even the wrong thing. You might have just wrote too much or not clearly enough.
Don't second guess yourself. If you think you're writing about the right thing, okay, and you're done, you get done with the Clean Water Act and you say, gee, I wish I would have written about that better, your time is up, move on. Okay? If you spend a lot of time second guessing yourself, you're going to spend a lot of time making yourself more anxious and probably not getting that many more points. Okay? We can talk separately about, different individuals respond to this in different ways. All right? But if you find yourself just second guessing yourself over and over again, just, practice helps get you through some of that. All right? But part of this is just not playing mental games with yourself. Okay? And just doing your best. You write about this, then you write about this, and you write about this, and then at that point you ought to be about done. Okay? Am I being clear enough? What I'm trying to do is give you a sense of how to manage, because time management is huge here. It's just huge. Because what happens is, as a practical matter, beyond a certain point, I'm pretty open-ended. I don't say you only get so many points on this, and you only get so many points on this, and so many points on this. you'll see from my scoring, okay, I'm pretty open-ended. For me, it's like basketball, but that's the raw score. And the practical reality is, okay, is there's only about so many points you can get out of each one of these. And I'm not gonna be real happy if you spend all your time writing about just one issue and not about the other stuff, okay? If you really wanna score points, you try and get as many issues as you can. Am I clear enough? Okay. So what happens then is you use the other reason the short list becomes important is watch this, okay? Because this used to happen to me. I am so into the Endangered Species Act, okay? And I'm really nailing this, I think I am, and sometimes I'm right, and sometimes I'm not. All right, but I really feel like I'm nailing this, and I get done with the Endangered Species Act, and I'm thinking, wow, now what do I do? Where am I, right? Go back to your list and you say, oh, right, NEPA, okay, let's go. You use the first part of the exam, in other words, those minutes after you read the question. You create your issues list, and then the issues list becomes like your shopping list, if you will, when you go to the store. Those are the things you need to do before you're done. So, one more thing about this. I first figured this out for the Pennsylvania bar exam. I moved here about a year and a half after I passed the Michigan bar exam, and part of the advice I give students about how you really don't want to take a bar exam twice is based on personal experience, okay? Yes, passing the Michigan bar was great. Yes, passing the Pennsylvania bar was great, but studying for the bar exam is really not my idea of the best way that I want to spend time, okay? So, one, don't even think about treating the first bar exam as a practice exam. Get it, just pass it, be done with it. Do what you need to do and pass it. But the second thing is, what I saw, and I was sick as a dog that day in Philadelphia, is I figured out this, okay? I figured this out. And on an old electric typewriter, I wrote 24 pages in 6 hours. Now, for some of you, that's probably nothing, but that was pretty good, all right? I could do that because whatever problem I picked up on the bar exam, whether it was a trust problem, property problem, contracts problem, a corporation's problem, it didn't matter. I knew what to do. Identify, name the rule, state the first element of the rule, and then away we go. I knew what to do. That's what enabled me to get a lot of writing done. And so part of the reason I'm personally convinced of the value of this is it worked for me, but part of it too is it makes sense. If you understand this structure, you spend less time staring at the floor, trying to figure out which is the accelerator, which is the brake, where am I now, how do I use the turn signal, because you're doing all this stuff naturally and automatically. Okay? All right, so take a look at exercise 4 now. All right, this is a super fun problem. Part of the super fun problem is whether Jane Singh, who's thinking about acquiring this property, would be liable as an owner-operator. And what I'm going to show you here, I'm going to show you something about how I score. I'm going to take you through the elements of owner-operator liability in the context of the Jane Singh problem, because I want you to see how this goes. Now, basically, you start out, okay, something you start out flagging in some basic way what we're talking about here, okay? You flag owner-operator liability, you give me the statute, okay, and then you say, if all of the following are met. This is one way you can introduce this. I'll tell you, by the way, that the exam writing book gives a couple copies of, shows a couple of examples of old property exams. And I've heard, like Kathy Nelson, for example, say, can't you put more civil procedure in your exam book? Well, yeah, I could, but I don't. And one of the reasons I don't, she's right, it would be better if I did. But my larger point is it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. For those of you in my property class, I'm going to grade your environmental law exams exactly the same way. I don't change, it's the same. Okay, different rules, but the same thing. And what you're looking for here, this is the first element, right? You need to have an owner-operator, all right? Well, all we have here is that she wants to acquire the land. She's not the owner-operator yet, all right? So if you say owner-operator, okay, I give you a point for that. If you say she wants to acquire the land, all right, I'll give you 2 points for that. I'm not sure there's a whole lot more to add to that. You could say she does not own the land yet, okay? I might give you 2 more points for that, all right? And if I do, then what you get here is 4. Because I'm not locked into 1-to-1. The more complex and detailed your analysis is, the better you do. This is just my scoring guide. It's not my scoring law. All right? You draw a conclusion on this. Well, what's your conclusion likely to be? Well, your conclusion is likely to be something like, well, if she buys the property, she'll be liable, but she's not liable now. Okay, that's a fair conclusion. All right, second thing. All right, you need a vessel or a facility, right? So, all right, if you say that, I give you a point for that. Often, rule statements include definitions of key terms. All right? Facility includes, and this is a definition. All right? You put that in there, I give you a point for that. All right? And then you can see there's a couple for facts. There's something here for conclusions. If you say other things that are not here, I'll give you credit for those. If you say this and not that, you get credit for this and not that. Okay, and then you get a point for the conclusion. And all I'm doing, as you can see, is I'm taking your sentences and I'm turning them into numbers. Third element. In every single one of these should be a separate paragraph. Okay? Every single one of these should be a separate paragraph. All right, from which there is a release or a threatened release. Okay? Point for that. Here's a point. If you define the term, what release means, I give you points for that. Here I just say discuss, all right? It's open-ended. There could be all kinds of different facts that you talk about, all right? What's going on? What facts are there in this problem that are relevant to this, and what do you have to say about them? If you say there's this fact, I'll give you 2 points for that. If you say, but this fact could mean something opposed, you know, this fact could mean that there really was no spilling or really leaking and so forth because of whatever reason, I might give you 2 points for that. If you respond to that counter-argument, I might give you 2 more points for that. If you've got a really good policy argument here, I might give you 2 points for that. And so what happens is, consider 2 possibilities, all right? And this happens all the time in my world, okay? Is exam number 1, instead of going 6 digits, we'll just do 2, okay? Exam number 1, there's a point here, 2 points here, and a point here. On this particular one, exam number 1, okay, gives 4 points. Exam number 2, the student states the rule, explains the rule, identifies a couple of different facts, throws in some counter-arguments, has a policy argument, okay, basically says 5 different things. Okay? So and so what happens is you add up 1 and 2 and 3 and 13. It shouldn't take a rocket scientist when you see this to understand what I was talking about with the scoring continuum. The more complete analysis of every element, the better you're going to do. Which causes the incurrence of response costs. Well, here it's kind of open-ended. Doesn't really kind of, here's one where you can say which causes the incurrence of response costs, and then you can state this, okay, from the problem, but does that really get you to a conclusion? Probably not, right? Because this doesn't really tell you that they've incurred any costs yet. So there's probably more things to be said. Well, they might do something and they might not, all right? Then you draw a conclusion. And a conclusion doesn't have to be just yes, no. It could be, well, if you know, in the prior one, or excuse me, in the first element, if she buys it, she could be liable. Here it could be, well, if they, you know, if they actually do something, there could be response costs. And then at the end of that, okay, oh, I'm not done yet, of a hazardous substance. All right, now are you beginning to see what's happening here? Okay, there's something monotonal about this. Every single element has the same analytical structure. And what you need to be able to do, on an exam, is first of all, you have to be able to identify the right issues. This is from a different problem, of course. If you don't get the issues right, if you're writing about, for that problem, for the CSU problem, if you're writing about the Clean Air Act for page after page after page, okay, you're not going to get 8 points for it because there's no Clean Air Act problem there. The good thing about environmental law is issue spotting shouldn't be that hard. Oh, they put something in the water. I wonder what statute that is. Okay? Oh, the government went off and did a big thing without really thinking it through. I wonder what statute that is. All right? A lot of the issue spotting stuff in environmental law should be pretty straightforward. So issue spotting matters. And then when you get to individual issues, what really matters, all right, is your knowledge of the individual elements, your ability to pull those out of the supplement and then apply them, and to figure out quickly what facts might go with these. Now I want to go back to something Bo said, although he didn't quite say it, is, it's the best way to do a lot of this stuff is not to spend 5 minutes on each element and wonder whether you can extract one last fact from it. Okay? Unless you're really truly not seeing anything, go with the stuff that you see. Don't spend a huge amount of time looking for one more new fact, okay? Unless there's something you know that's there and you're just really missing. And trust yourself a little bit to capture most of the facts. Not everybody's going to say everything that can be said about any one element. But what really works over the long haul, meaning over a 2.5-hour exam, is the folks who consistently do something like this are going to do a lot better than the folks who do consistently something like this. So, of a hazardous substance, and then finally, when you get done with all the elements, draw a conclusion on her overall liability, okay? And I should say, okay, so let's see, where are we? Oh, one last thing. For each of the two questions, I have 11 points that are available for writing. There's a pretty good correlation between the folks who do really well and the folks who do really well on these points. And I'll tell you why. If you try to talk about, we'll go back to this again, the Endangered Species Act issue and the Clean Water Act issue at the same time, what you're going to have is a mess. All right? It's going to be a mess for two reasons. It'll be a mess on my end because I won't have any idea what you're talking about, and I'll have to figure out, oh, she is writing about two different rules at the same time. How do I score that? All right? Well, as the years pass, I get more and more unfriendly to really trying to extract the last 2 points of value when somebody's tied two things together. Okay? But on the other hand, right, if you talk about each of these issues separately on your end, you are more likely to understand them more clearly, you're more likely to write about them more completely, all right? And you're more likely to do better on your exam. Now, same thing with the elements. I mean, what you saw here, right, is if you take a look at this, each of the elements has its own paragraph and is discussed separately. One of the things that I often see people do is something like the following, and I hate this. All right? Somebody will say, well, Singh will be liable as an owner-operator, okay, if Singh is the owner-operator of a vessel or facility from which there is a release or threatened release which causes the occurrence or response costs of a hazardous substance. And dumps out the whole sentence and all the elements, and then sort of tells the story, and without analyzing each of the elements separately. You see what I'm talking about? That's I hate that, okay? It's a terrible way to write. It's a terrible way to convince a judge or a senior attorney of anything. All right, if you write out all the elements all at once, then go back and analyze each of them separately. I don't want to stop you from writing out all the elements at once, but don't analyze them all at once. Have that been clear enough, the distinction? Okay. What else? Okay, clear signposting. A couple things that really matter here. One is making sure I understand about each issue. Little headings help a lot. That's great. Separate paragraph for each element helps a lot. Actually, that's an incredibly valuable tool for me. The people who do that make me happy. The people who don't, I just have to work harder to extract value because there's a whole paragraph and there's 3 different elements talked about in it. It's a little, you know, if you don't paragraph each one, it's just that much harder to read, that much harder to give points to. And then finally, and this goes to Bo's question a little bit, again, in a different sort of way, is my life experience with a lot of things is that I am most nervous at the very beginning. Okay? I am most nervous at the very beginning. I remember, for example, when I learned to give speeches in English class in 7th grade, I would stand up and my mouth would be all dry, okay, standing up in front of the class. I remember from exams, the first minute or two, you're really pretty nervous about it. You haven't started writing yet. You're very self-conscious, okay, I get that. One of the things that I will do, and I actually give you points for this, if you take the call of the question, and it's the first sentence that you write down, I'll give you 2 points for it. All right? I do that for 2 reasons. One is for your benefit. It's a calming thing. You get 2 free points, basically, for simply writing the call of the question. If you copy it from the exam and just say the question here is blah, 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 boom, I'll give you 2 points for that. But the other thing that it does is it puts the answer, it puts the question in front of you. It prevents you from answering something that was not asked. It doesn't prevent you, but it makes it less likely that you will answer something that wasn't asked. Okay. So, Jessica, is that what you wanted? Mm-hmm. Okay. Any questions about exam writing or in the exam writing process? Anything at all? Okay. Well, I want to spend just a couple minutes on something from yesterday about the 404 guidelines. Tim and I talked about it a little bit, but I also want to be clear about something. We went through this before and it had a different background. And of course, the question is, should the discharge be permitted at all? We said, well, will it significantly degrade waters? If the answer to that is yes, then no permit. All right, so far so good. Then you ask, secondly, well, will the discharge violate state or federal law? Okay, again, if the answer is yes, no permit. All right. Now, the next question, and there's a couple pieces of this I'm trying to be clearer about, perhaps, than I was yesterday, is take a look at this. And you say, all right, no degradation is significant, no significant degradation of waters, no violation of law. All right. Next question is the discharge into a special aquatic site? And then for that, you look at the explanation of a special aquatic site that is on page 890 of your text, all right, where there's a paragraph called Special Aquatic Sites. It's the second full paragraph from the bottom of the page. And one of those categories is wetlands. All right, if so, is the discharge into a special aquatic site? All right, now at that point, the definition of wetlands that we talked about before, remember? Soil, water, vegetation, okay, comes into play. And then you say, all right, so is the activity water dependent? All right, if the answer to that is no, then there is no permit, okay? The answer to that is no, then there is no permit. And you saw, all right, that whether something is water dependent or not, well, the water dependent business is, does it have a dock? Is this about being open on the waterway? All that kind of thing, all right? And then you say, all right, so is a discharge into a special aquatic site? You say, well, okay, no. Is a practicable alternative, or excuse me, is the activity water dependent? Well, okay, I'm sorry, is discharge into a special aquatic site? No, is a practicable alternative available? Okay, more wetlands again. And you say, well, okay, if a practical alternative is available, then no permit. But consider this, all right? It is possible that you're discharging into a wetland and the activity is water dependent. Okay? You're discharging into a wetland, you're filling in a wetland and the activity is water dependent. Maybe you get a permit. Okay? Maybe you get a permit. All right, and that goes back to, I think, the sort of a larger point about the Bersani case yesterday. Okay? I hope that helps a little bit. All right, questions?
In that special aquatic site, what
Yeah.
exactly is a riffle and pool complex?
Well, I think I know what that is. I think if you, there are places where the water is sort of running, okay, and it's sort of like down a little bit of a falls, it sort of, you know, goes over rocks and that sort of thing, and then there's a pool, and then kind of goes down more. Okay, I think that's what that is, but I've never frankly thought of that. Okay, it's a good question. That's just my best guess at an answer. Okay, other questions? I don't know, by the way, Jessica, whether I'm outside the camera range or not, but
Oh, you have been, but it's okay. We've got you now.
okay. Well, see, I've been thinking that my big thing is I need to have the PowerPoint there. It's more important to see the PowerPoint than to see me, so. Other questions? One thing I'll tell you is that about the exam, one more thing I'll tell you about the exam, actually, when you think about that, is that if you look at exercise 15, one more thing about exercise 15 that is worth mentioning is this is the one that is the Clean Water Act and Maintenance Means Act of the EPA problem. This problem is pretty typical of the kind of question that I give when I ask 75-minute questions or questions that are of that length. They tend to involve multiple statutes. They tend to involve a fairly significant number of facts. And they tend to involve a decent number of multiple element statutory rules. Okay? What I do is I give you, in a sense, a big sandbox, okay, and I give you a lot of stuff to play with. My experience has ordinarily been that people stay busy with the exam pretty much until the end of the time available. And my thought process on that goes back to the very first property exam I gave about 20 years ago, not quite. And my experience was is that if you give an exam where the difference between the high and low scores is pretty small, it's really hard to feel good about the differences among the grades that you give. I like a really big distribution, and my experience is I get a really big distribution if I ask a lot of stuff. Then I can be pretty comfortable. My object really is to be able to sleep at night after I turn in your grades. Robert?
Now, for the call of this question, you focus us on the Clean Water Act.
Yep.
But for the exam, you're saying it will be more open-ended.
Oh my God, yeah.
It'll just be
really,
what's involved?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, what I do with old exam questions and the exercises is I focus you on the thing that we studied for that day. All right, that's what I try to do, because otherwise it just gets to be, out of control. But if you go back, you take that very question, what you could do is the original call of the question was something like, you work for an environmental group, okay, that hates this stuff. How do you stop it? All right? And yeah, you're working for an environmental group, but you got to be objective about the law, right? You've got to be honest about the law, and so, there's a lot to write about. Is he adding, okay, a biologically altered material? I mean, what I'm doing with that question is I'm putting the Gallo-Russell case, right? The Gina family history case, right? That's an example of that. When people are dumping buckets of this stuff on shore or in the upper reaches of a particular stream, I'm putting on the table the question of, Scalia and Kennedy jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act. So, anyway, and I think they got federal grant money for this, and so that would involve NEPA.
I just had a question, so like if during the exam, one of the issues closely relates to to a case that we've read in class,
Yeah,
should we mention the case, or, obviously,
you can if it'll help me understand it,
okay?
okay?
That's not
Sometimes,
necessarily gonna help us with.
well, here's what the test that I ordinarily employ, in deciding whether to award points to that, right? Is are you adding something on the law and the facts that really helps the analysis? If you're adding something on the law, I might give you a point for it, right? If you're adding in terms of the analysis, if that adds something, I might give you 2 points for it, or I might give you more. And so I won't say yes and I won't say no. The question I'll ask is the question I would ask with every sentence, okay? Does this add enough value to be worth giving points to? And students in the past have found ways of answering questions where I do give value for that. You don't have to, but it can.
So would the same be true then, like, if we're throwing in counter arguments for everything and it's getting to the point where it's frivolous, there's no point throwing in a counter argument?
I wouldn't throw in a counter argument unless you had some foundation for it, okay? So, for example, all right, the discharge is coming out of a pipe, all right? And your analysis might be, is it a point source? Question, okay? And then you have you define a point source, right? And you might say, a pipe is a point source. Therefore, and then you're done, right? And if you say, well, there could be a counter argument that it's not really, well, at that point, you're just making stuff up, right? There really isn't a counter argument there. Save your powder, if you will, all right, for where there's like a real counter argument and where something occurs to you that might actually be real. Okay, because occasionally I see that people are trying too hard and they're saying, well, a pipe might really not be a point source. Really? How does that work? Yes.
On exercise 15,
Yes, sir.
assuming that the call to question is more open and that it involves the Endangered Species Act.
Yep.
It says that there's no critical habitat and that most of the population of the one endangered mussel species is located upstream of the project.
Okay.
Because this seems to be more of a Clean Water Act, like how much of the endangered species analysis would we go through? And at what point would we just say, well, this is all happening downstream, therefore this? And then when Tim was talking, I realized that no matter which way you go, you could counter-argument and say that either the mussels aren't being affected or that they potentially could be affected. But, like, what would we deal with in that problem? Would we have to explain how they designate a critical habitat because it says that none's been identified?
No, I'm not interested in a textbook. I'm interested in problem solving, okay? And so what happens is, do you remember there's a slide that shows you a list of all the different Endangered Species Act issues that you could see, all right? So it talks here about endangered species, all right? When you see a problem and it says endangered species, all right, that ought to, this is what makes issue spotting in environmental law in some ways a little easier, okay? Because if you've been paying any attention at all, you say, oh, the Endangered Species Act, all right? But this is, once you get past that, the issue spotting gets a little harder, okay? Is this section 7, jeopardy for endangered species? Is it section 7, conserve and maintain? Is it section 7, consultation? Is it section 7, critical habitat? Is it section 9, no take? All right, you see where I'm going? All right, and so what you do is you have to sort of go through your checklist of Endangered Species Act issues and see which ones seem to apply here, okay? And so, for example, you say no jeopardy. I don't think no jeopardy isn't going to work here, okay? Because the power mussel lives in 3 other states. All right, so no jeopardy isn't gonna work here. Well, what might work here?
Oh, I could conserve?
Well, conserve and maintain might work. Okay, what else might work here? And again, there's gotta be a plausible basis for the argument. I'm not gonna give you credit for, section 7A2 says you can't jeopardize blah, blah facts. I'm not gonna jeopardize, therefore no jeopardy. I'm not gonna give you credit for saying something's not an issue when we all know it's not an issue. Okay? And so, Robert, you had your hand up.
I was saying that maybe the no take.
Yeah, no take, maybe, okay? Our power muscle's gonna die as a result of this. Yeah, power muscles are gonna die as a result of this, okay? So maybe that violates no take. Maybe there's an opportunity for an incidental take permit, but there's not really enough facts in the problem to tell you whether you get one or not, okay? But you can at least explain that.
No,
Yeah,
would you basically just mention it like that? Like,
Yeah.
there is a possibility, but due to minor facts or something like that?
well, I mean, what I would say in a problem like this is, I would say, this looks like a take to me. Okay? And I would go through the elements of a take, okay? What does take mean? No person,